the only autofocus I will use, if anything, is like on on a point and shoot. And even at that point, like I would probably actually rather not use it because then it's, could be hunting or whatever for focus.
This podcast is brought to you by Squarespace, and you guys know how much I love Squarespace. In fact, I use it for my own website, adamlerner.net. If you guys want to save 10% on your Squarespace and domain, use the code ADAM at checkout, ADAM, and you'll save 10%. All right, guys, we are here. We are back. The Brooklyn Photo Works ISO320 podcast, and today is an amazing day because we have a photographer that Daniel and I both admire and follow. And a lot of you guys admire and follow as well, apparently, because he's got a massive following on the internets, and it's well deserved. There's a lot of signal, and there's really no noise, and that's the kind of stuff that Daniel and I love. He's also a Leica photographer, which it doesn't mean everything, but it definitely helps to kind of galvanize the connection that Daniel and I feel with other photographers, because there's a choice being made to shoot in a really kind of painfully difficult way, but to get the results that you really love. So we have Benj Haish.
Yeah.
He's hailing from Tacoma, Washington, which for those of you that don't know, that's a state on the other side of the country. So Daniel and I are on the New York side, which is the East Coast, and Benj is on the West Coast. When Benj first actually got onto the podcast, he was wearing a full toque, a down parka, and he had like mittens and gloves and a hat, and he brushed the snow off. But no, all kidding aside, it's really just such an incredible pleasure and an honor to have you on our show. And we just can't even wait to dig in. In fact, we didn't even have any like really a lot of pre-work today, because we're like, we're going to get right into it, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
There you go. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Definitely. So for right off the bat, Daniel brought your work to my attention a little over a year ago. And I was instantly like, holy crap, man. Like, there is such a look about your work, and it's beautiful. Now, you have done an incredible job of not only capturing your environment, which the Pacific Northwest to me is like, that's the holy grail of like, if you want a good backdrop, just go out your door.
Yeah.
But without
making,
so you've made that kind of a component in your work, in my view. It's definitely a collaborative force.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, just looking at your, you just see every shot is like, holy crap. Like that's the front page of a catalog.
There's so many layers to the photos. Part of you is jealous that you get, that your photos are so good. Part is jealousy of where you're actually taking these pictures.
Sure.
And here on the East Coast, you're like, I just don't have that. I don't, we don't have log cabins in the woods with snow and beautiful ocean.
You guys do though. I mean, you have different, different stuff.
We have Vermont, we have Maine, we have it. We're so densely populated here that in order to find those kinds of views, we have to work a lot harder. Like I could drive, 5 hours into the White Mountains of New Hampshire and have some of the most incredible views, but I've got to drive 5 hours to the mountains of New Hampshire. And if my couple, is not anywhere near there and they don't feel like spending 10 hours in the car for their shoot.
Yeah.
But your photos also have a really relaxed vibe to them. And it all makes sense, as I started to get to know your work. I wasn't aware with what you were shooting with or things like that. And I think over the years, you've really kind of made that part of your thing, part of your persona is, here's what I use. I'm an open book. I think one of the first videos I saw of yours, you were unpacking from a wedding and you were just like, not really giving, you're not really giving a shit. And you're just pulling out stuff. This is my flash. This is the lens. And I was like, oh, it makes sense. Cause I started with an M9. It was accompanied by Nikons at the time. And that was how I fell in love with Leica. And
totally.
now that's all I shoot. I just have M bodies. And so I said, there's another photographer there you go. There's another photographer that's doing it like I am. And I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
I kind of keep to myself. I don't really have a big network of wedding photographers. But I don't know any that are using that gear. It's all Canon, Nikon, now Sony, Fuji. But
yeah,
so it's kind of a rare breed to make things a little harder on yourself the day of.
Well, in a modern world, when you can have an autofocusing camera that and especially now, that literally does all the heavy lifting, to use a manually focusing camera, that's a specific choice. So let's dive into that. What put an M body in your hands and decided, like, let's go choose to shoot somebody's decisive moments where I get one shot at this with a manually focusing camera?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so I've been doing weddings specifically since 2007. And I believe I picked up a Leica M9 as well in 2014. I think that's when I picked up a rangefinder for the first time. And kind of like a lot of people just kind of like instantly fell in love with that process and having just a completely different view of, you don't have autofocus. You don't have all these auto settings. Like you have to manually flip the shutter speeds and the apertures instead of flicking little dials and stuff. So there was just like this extra sort of connection to that process to me, right? When I started using it, I'd used Canon for years. And I kind of wanted to use it because I started to fall into these, what we kind of termed like adventure elopements, where, like you guys were talking about, like I'm hiking miles into the mountains, and bringing like, big DSLRs clunking around with me and big lenses and stuff like that. Just like was, I don't know, just like a total burden to have to carry that and the rest of my stuff that I'm hiking with. And, so it was kind of like when the first Fuji started to come out with like the X Pro 1 and stuff like that. But those were just too rudimentary for me still, and they weren't full frame. And so, yeah, I got a Leica M9 and started shooting with that and started shooting elopements specifically with that and the Fuji actually. And that just kind of like grew my love for those smaller bodies. And then the other thing that I realized too is once I started using them was I was taking less than half the amount of photos that I would with a, autofocus camera, because I would just be like autofocus and click, 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 click. Hopefully one of these lands. And with the rangefinder process, if I line it up and the camera's working, like I know it's going to be in focus.
That's also a big if, right?
Yeah. But like the thing about it was I felt like that connection just made sense to me. And so I just practiced with it a lot. Like I would like take some photos of my wife, like walking across the street. And then I would realize like, okay, cool. Like she's walking at this pace. Now I can move the lens at this same pace to keep, that same kind of thing moving. And then I also realized once I started, trying it at a wedding for the first time, like I would bring it and shoot, a couple of photos of like maybe some bridesmaids or something like that coming down the aisle. And then I would put it down and use a DSLR for when like the couple would come down. And once I started nailing those consistently, then I started just doing it for everything. But yeah, I mean, there's a zillion reasons why I use Leica cameras, but
I mean, we are also, I guess the saying is preaching the choir, but yeah, I mean, this is what, the questions I get asked by other photographers. And what I love doing is sometimes someone's like, oh my God, can I check it out? I give it to them and they look at it. They have no idea what's going on. And they try to take a big focus and then it's completely out.
Yeah.
But it makes me feel more connected to the art. I jumped on the Sony bandwagon a couple of years ago and sort of had the opposite feeling. I was in the beginning, I was like, holy shit, I'm able to track an eyeball with the A9 and it was incredible. And then not very long after, a few months, I sort of just looked at the cameras. They never moved unless I was working. I always use my M9 for personal stuff. And I just wanted that connection again. And the quality, and I tried to go to Fuji and the sensors just didn't, the images just didn't hold up to me.
I spent a lot of time with the Fujis. I think I started with the X100 original.
Yeah.
Because I really
actually,
I wanted a little companion that was high quality. And I remember I took it to Cuba with my Nikon D3S, and I have these massive prints from that Fuji. My favorite photos
Yeah.
are with the Fuji from that trip, mainly probably because those were the moments when I was probably the most discreet and the closest to what was going on. So it kind of enabled me to kind of cross that barrier. And for me, what got me into shooting the Leica was being able to get almost like a medium format quality of an image in a very small package. Because I shot medium format digital for years. I had, you know, old Hasselblads and phase ones and Leafs and whatever. I took them everywhere. I took them on location. I traveled with them. If I had to shoot in California, it's like, they're coming with me. Massive, bulky, pain in the ass, slow.
Yeah.
And the results were amazing. And then when I first picked up, you know, an M body and I took those images home, I was like, oh my God, you know, I'm getting like incredible separation. I'm getting stuff that's tack sharp, that's wide open. And then I started getting like completely enamored with the process. Yeah. It's like it's like a romantic affair that you have with the camera when you first start shooting it.
And then you put each lens on and it gives you something different. You find that magic lens body combo, which I think for most people is probably the 50 Summilux on the body. But we've actually been, Adam and I have been talking ad nauseum about, you know, he got an M10P from a friend, and he's like, he sold his M10, was waiting, got an M10P, didn't go to the M10R. And he's like, should I just do a 240? And I was like, well, is that guy Benj? I mean, he's still using the 240. And
I am.
The images are, you know, at the end of the day, you can't tell. I mean, what's held you up from just it's been working, and why mess with it?
Yeah. I mean, mainly it's, if we're being completely honest, it's just the price.
Yeah.
Because I have to buy at least 2 of them. And so jumping from a camera that's probably worth, I don't know, $2,500 to $2,700 now in the MT40s to, you know, those like $7,000-8,000 M10Rs or whatever. Then I have to buy 2 of them, and it would end up costing me like $18,000.
Yeah.
So
what about like
a couple of used M10s?
Used M10 and using a 240 and M10, and you know, if you need that low light.
Well, yeah. So that's the thing is like since the 5D Mark,
I mean, all we do on here is try to get our guests to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's
at the end of this podcast, you're going to be broke as crap.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I'll give you the rationale here. So when I first started doing wedding stuff, I ended up like, my first nice camera was the original Canon 5D. Then when the 5D Mark II came out, I bought one of those and tried to shoot a 5D Mark II and a 5D or 5D and a 5D Mark II together. And then the color differences were so off that I had to like edit. It took me twice as long because I had to edit all of the Canon 5D files, and then I had to edit all the 5D Mark II files and then try to match the two. And so I did that again with the 5D Mark III. It came out, I bought one and then tried to do it together like that. And like a month later, I just bought another 5D Mark III because I was like, I'm spending way too much time trying to match these files. And so I actually did that as well. A friend let me borrow his M10. And then I shot it alongside my M240s and still had to like, you know, do some finagling to make them look similar. And
was it easier than the Canon files? Or
they were closer. Yeah. Closer. I feel like the M10 was still closer to the M240 than a few of the, you know, iterations of the 5D, but it was still enough that was like, all right, well, I'm not just shifting the white balance or something. I'm also shifting other elements, you know, tonally within the photo. And so I just decided like, if I'm moving to a different camera or whatever that I'm using in my mainstay, I'm going to buy 2 of them. And my plan actually was going to be to try that out for a month, buy a couple M10s, like used M10s, and shoot them for like a month or so and just see like, hey, is this worth it for me? And then hopefully move from the M240s. But then COVID hit and 80% of my work postponed until next year. Spending money on photo gear kind of dumped out of the world of possibilities.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's why
Unfortunately.
I had
like
I had an M10R.
Yeah.
And I would have had one a month ago. My dealer called me up. He's like, I have one,
Yeah.
and I was like, I don't have the money.
Yeah. Great.
So it was like,
Book me some
that
work.
kind of ended that. And I've talked to a bunch of friends of mine that have them, and one of our guests, and the fundamental difference really is that you just have like oodles of recovery. So if you're shooting, let's say, a subject in your, that you're kind of isolating in your frame, and there's somebody in the foreground that's a little bit, in shadow, you can just open it right up and then they're there.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But it hasn't become an issue. And like you said, with 80% of our work on hold, there's not the abundant need to have to constantly be switching gear or making big moves like that, because we can kind of get by with what we have.
But boredom, congrats, because boredom for us plays a big
Huge
part
role,
of
yeah.
wanting to switch. Maybe this camera, this body, this lens, and trading what you have is using as currency, which is kind of part of the fun.
Let me
That's often what I do with like film cameras though. So like that's kind of like where my like boredom moves to is I'll go, okay, well, I'm not maybe using this like Mamiya 645 much anymore. Maybe I'll trade that for the Pentax version, or that's kind of like where because I usually often will bring a film camera along on these shoots as well, and that's kind of my.
Now, do you offer that to your clients, or do you just add that into what you're doing? Like, is that something?
So I can't so if someone wants me to shoot a bunch of film, like I have two packages basically within my thing that like I could shoot all film if you would like I have an M6 and an M2 and a Hasselblad and like all sorts of stuff that I could shoot with. But then most of the time, like I also have it where I could take like 10 rolls during some random stuff and kind of shoot it throughout. But usually I just show up with whatever camera I feel like fits the day or my boredom
your vibe,
the most, my vibe for that day. And sometimes so one of the times I actually have this camera right next to me is like I showed up to a wedding and shot this like Fuji Class W with all black and white film at this like wedding around Christmas time, and just shot it with the flash on and stuff, and it was super fun. But then also like I'll just show up with a Rolleiflex or a Hasselblad or whatever, kind of depending on what it feels like,
I've been in love with what I've been doing with 6.7.
Yes.
And so for the last year I've been, because I didn't learn on film, I learned on digital. And the last year I've really been developing at home, learning how to develop black and white, shooting film, and got an M3, M6, and different film cameras. And it's been such a passion to and Adam's like, dude, it's so much easier if you just shot it with your M10M. Like, you would have been saved a lot more time. But I love the process. I love when I'm downstairs and I'm doing it myself. And I actually just sent out a couple of rolls to be processed by a lab. I just want to see what I can get back.
I mean, it's a similar process, right? Like no one's shooting a digital camera out of convenience. You're shooting it because of the process anyway. And so I feel like the film is just an additional process beyond that, even, for sure.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. And I've really my latest acquisition was I did a couple trades for a G2 set.
Nice.
So I got rid of my T2 and an old Summicron 90. And it was the Summicron, it was a version 1. It was like, that big, and the throw was, you'd crank it. So I was like, fuck that. I could just, I'll get a lot more use. But the G2, what's amazing is I could shoot a 6,000th of a second. And so I'm wide open. I didn't realize that because it said, you can manually put it at 4,000, but then I guess there's an electronic shutter. And it goes to 6,000.
It's far beyond the 1,000 that I get out of,
exactly.
the Leicas.
Yeah. I was like, so I'm shooting a 5.6 at 1,000th, or to be wide open. So that was, but those are fun. And I'm really starting to try to implement that in the weddings I do. And for the clients that, I think you have, from the little I know, but whatever you put out on social media,
Yeah.
I have to sort of work a little bit more with my clients and on the East Coast for film. I think that where you're at and where your clients go, they come to you now. You've established yourself in a certain way, and they go to you because they know that they can get amazing film and they care about it. I think for me, it's almost nothing worse than shooting film, putting that time and energy and passion into it when they don't care. Like, just whatever.
Yeah, I feel like that's also like how I view it though too. Like I view it more that I'm usually shooting the film for me,
Yeah.
and like they also just get it, right? So like if they don't like a single photo out of the film that I send them, like I don't really care. Like I'm doing it more for my own creative process and
100% agree with that.
reminding myself to slow down, and especially with like shooting a Hasselblad or something like that. It's almost like a slap in the face to be like, slow down, take your time, think about what you're doing here. And I feel like that like forced slowdown makes me think more about what I'm doing again, which then brings out more creative and better images.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it also adds to the pressure, because if you are shooting some decisive moment stuff that can't be replicated, you have to be pretty
I don't know
confident.
if that's where the Hasselblad comes out, though. That might stay in the bag during those moments.
Yeah, I mean, usually not shooting the Hasselblad like when there's a bunch of movement, but I mean, like the Leica I would feel fine with. It's just like the throwing the winding is the hard part when there's like fast movement. So I have a friend that actually bought like a Leica Vit, so he could just, or whatever those are called.
So
you
you
can
just
like
crank, right?
Yeah, you just like flick the little thing on the bottom. Which if I was ever gonna do a wedding all on Leica and all on film, I would probably try to pick one of those up.
Cool. One thing that I've noticed too, and I talked a little bit about it with Daniel, maybe you can elaborate on it. This is more kind of to do with your practice. You mentioned the word elopement, and it's on your website, and
Yeah,
it seems to be like maybe more of a West Coast thing, the elopement category.
sure.
And I don't recall that being a thing up until a few years ago.
Yeah.
So can you explain that to like
Yeah.
the viewers at
For
home?
sure. Yeah. So, so in 2013, it's a super long story, but I'll try to cut it short. In 2013, I photographed a wedding that was like a true elopement. It was just two people, a friend of mine who was their officiant, myself, and a videographer. And they got married in the middle of the woods, then hiked up to the top of this little mountain, and we took photos up there. And to my knowledge, that hadn't really been done mainstream much before. And so we like submitted it to like a wedding blog and stuff like that, and it just like blew up, went super viral. It was like the most popular wedding of the year on that blog, like was one of the most popular weddings that was like non-celebrity on Pinterest and stuff like that. And so since then, like we called it like an adventure elopement because it's kind of what it was. Like we hiked during it and stuff like that. And that whole thing has like legitimately become its own industry. So now there are tons of like hundreds of photographers that they only do adventure elopements. And kind of the thing with that is like we have all this like beautiful like landscape, and so a lot of it's obviously kind of tied to like national parks and forests and mountains and that kind of thing. And I think like sort of culturally too, like you move towards the West Coast, you're like sort of breaking away from everything anyway. So you might run into people that are going to be more likely to break with tradition and go out and do something like that. But especially during all this COVID stuff, I'm getting more and more people who were planning on having big weddings, and now they see that they could do something like that, and it's almost like giving them permission to do something like that as well, which is I find pretty interesting.
That's pretty awesome, and I'm glad that you've been collecting royalties for pioneering.
So you started that.
I mean, yeah, my
So
clients came up with the idea for it, right?
I mean,
but yeah.
So the internet should know that this was Benj's idea exclusively, and that a percentage
exclusively
of your
yes
take should go
Please
to
pay
him.
me royalties.
I think that's awesome, and I think that it's amazing too that so many industries have evolved, and that I think that evolution in wedding photography and wedding, I guess, just wedding celebration is fantastic. You know, I think it's a great idea. I mean, sure, the traditional like 180 people in the space with all the different intervals of time thing, blah blah blah. You know, and like now we do this, now we do that. I think that there's a lot of that is done maybe to appease the family because, you know, they're old school and they're traditional. But I think the elopement is just so crazy special. And the fact that you have access to this, it's one thing to have access to somebody's special day, which is always beautiful. It's emotional. It's incredible.
Totally.
You can't help but get caught up in it. But to have it in such an exclusive way where you were literally one of a handful of people that were there on that special day. And you also helped to create the visual storytelling for that. That's pretty special, man. That's awesome. That's really
Do your
great.
backdrops get old?
Come on.
No. Like, come on.
I try to like I try to get my clients to go,
me, you know?
Yeah. Like I try to get my clients to go to new places that I haven't necessarily been. But if they're dead set on like the same place I've been to 20 times, like I'm not going to tell them no.
Right.
No, I mean, I've shot I've shot the same venue over 60 times, and there's always something a little different, but you know.
Yeah.
Would you?
I do tell my clients, like if I'm able to go somewhere I haven't gone as much or whatever, like I can be more creative because sometimes I'll fall into like, I've shot here before. And then sometimes also like I'll forget to take like a scene setting shot or some different kind of like environmental photograph because in my mind, I've already taken it before. Right. So it's like off my checklist of things to do. And so, yeah, there's this sense of like sort of discovery about something, which is like part of that adventure elopement thing. So like you're adventuring into something new. And so if I can do something that's a little bit more new in that way, it's definitely helpful. But at the same time, it's different people, different times of day, different times of year. So there's all sorts of things that are kind of constantly changing as well.
I did an engagement session this past weekend, and there's this little mountain by State Park a mile from my house, and we were like, let's just go there. We'll spend an hour. And then my wife told me about this place that our town owns. Apparently it's in between my house and the mountain, like a land, and it's called Riverhook. I guess they bought it, they preserve it. It's an old farmland, but there's an old house. There's a stone house, like carriage house, and it was tall wheatgrass. It was incredible. And so I just took them there. We spent the whole hour there. And like you were saying, when you're finding a new place and that excitement, you know, sometimes it's safe and I know what's going on at the venues I've been to and the places I've been to. But when you go to a new place, it like energizes your creativity and it feels really good. You're like, this is new. You've discovered things. And
Benj, when you go out and do this stuff, do you have a team? Do you have assistants, or you know, are you a lone gunman? Because I noticed on your site, you know, you've got associates, you've got, you know, I'm sure you got some other people that collaborate, but how does that typically factor into your process?
Yeah. Usually it's like, pretty solo for me. So like probably 90% of the work I do is solo. Mainly because I'm traveling for a ton of it. So, you'll also like look at my Instagram or my website or whatever, and you'll see Pacific Northwest, but then you also see, like I did like 3 weddings in Colorado last year. I was in Glacier National Park in Montana the other day. You know, I've shot in Yosemite a bunch of times. So like I'm generally mostly kind of like West Coast, but also, I travel for probably at least half of my work. And so adding that sort of additional cost onto clients and stuff like that to bring multiple people out. Usually I'm just kind of flying solo. And then sort of like the nature of the smaller wedding means that I don't need as much help because there's less people to coordinate. There's less stuff going on. So it makes me kind of photographing solo a lot easier for sure.
When you, so Glacier National Park, that's somewhere I've always wanted to visit. Did you drive out there? Did you fly? Like, how'd you manage that one?
Yeah. So I did fly this time, oddly enough, because the flight was only like an hour and 20 minutes from Seattle. So like it's super close. It would have taken me, I don't even know, like 12 hours or something like that to drive. So definitely easier to fly. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, like we have a ton of stuff around here. Like I remember I drove to Yellowstone when I was a kid. Well, I didn't drive, my parents did, but like they took me to Yellowstone and took me to the Badlands and took me to all these places when I was a kid. And like, I grew up going to the mountains, and we had a motorhome that we would drive around and go camping with all the time and stuff. So I think that's kind of like part of the reason why I fell easily into this whole like adventure elopement thing, is because it's just kind of like who I am and like how I grew up and stuff. A lot of the places that I have used for client backdrops and stuff are just places that I went as a kid.
Right.
So it all kind of just naturally kind of fell into place. And it's something I still like really, really enjoy. I'm trying to, especially without all this travel, like we can't fly as much anymore. And I have a small family with a baby coming in a month and a 4-year-old. So we're thinking about like buying a motorhome or like buying a trailer or something and finding ways to get out and go do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. My good buddy just did that with his 3 kids. He's been doing that a lot lately. Like he's been doing like these kind of family road trips because they've just been home for months and months and months and months. And it's a way that they get to get out, see things. And it's funny because he's the singer from my old band. And when we were on tour, we lived in a motorhome, the band.
Yeah.
And we spent so much time going to state parks and places like that, which was such a weird kind of juxtaposition from like playing like a punk rock club in like the dirtiest part of town to like then waking up like alongside of a lake. So it's we
had different touring experiences, Adam.
But I could, it's interesting too, because another friend of mine who's a photographer in St. Louis, he's actually considering doing a school bus conversion into a mobile home and just kind of traveling to different cities to do weddings and stuff like that, and just being able to kind of have like a traveling like photo studio kind of operation, so he's not just kind of limited to living in the city that in St. Louis. So it's look, I think it's an amazing idea. Obviously the experience would be killer, so long as you guys were safe and got everything.
I mean, I couldn't get my kid to walk today in a trail for 10 minutes. I mean,
this is New England versus
New England, not even New England. It's like,
I mean, Benj has to walk like 2 hours just to go from his garage to his house because everything's so spread apart. He parks on the bottom of the mountain, takes a chairlift up, and then
yeah, that's where I live. Totally. Yeah.
Don't ruin it for us. That's how we picture it.
It's so obvious, man.
And there's always the light dusting of snow, just with a little wind blowing.
It snows where I live like once a year. I don't even think it snowed this winter, like in my town. But we have the mountains like half an hour away. So
yeah, that's killer. That is killer.
Yeah.
So just back to like gear.
Yeah.
Apart from the camera that's filming you right now or being your portal to us.
Sure.
Do you actually bring any autofocusing gear out with you when you shoot, or are you just fully manual?
Yeah, it's all manual actually. And even like I bring the EOS R, which is like what's filming me, the Canon. But I only use it with my 90 Summicron just because I only use it for speeches. I only use it for ceremony stuff. And so I just toss it around my neck, use the Summicron on there. It's just easy to use the EVF and stuff, focus peaking, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I actually the only autofocus I will use, if anything, is like on a point and shoot. And even at that point, like I would probably actually rather not use it because then it's, could be hunting or whatever for focus. And so, yeah, my primary stuff is, the M240s. And then I usually bring a film camera. I have a Canon EOS 3. So like every once in a while I'll use that has autofocus.
Right.
But for the vast majority, it's all just manual focus, kind of like take your time. I have to work with a slow buffer on these cameras, so I can't just like mash the shutter. There's just a ton of limitations, but kind of like we were going back to a little bit earlier, I feel like those also like bring out more creativity. And
when you're looking at them on the computer at the end of a wedding, at the end of a shoot session, that feeling is the reason why, when you see the results, you're like, that's why I do it. That's part of the reason. Because Adam and I are talking about implementing, we're each trying to implement an autofocus camera. Usually I have a CL around my neck and 2 ends. I had an SL with the 24-90, and I just didn't gel with the 24-90 basically. So I got
me neither. I borrowed that for a little bit and was like, this is huge and variable aperture, and
I
like,
literally
not for me.
hit people with the 24-90 as it was hanging off my strap.
Yeah.
Whereas my form, it was nothing on the other side. But I got it just loaned, the SL2 with the 90.
Yeah.
So I got it last night, and I'm like, kind of, basically what it comes down to is the image quality is incredible. The smoothness, the very medium format, even more so than the M's.
It's really three-dimensional looking,
and
in a nice way.
The skin tones are so pleasing. The hair, the eyelids, and you can crop in for days. Obviously, I'm not a huge cropper, so it's not. That's not a huge thing for me.
You don't fix it in Photoshop?
Yeah, each photo I throw into Photoshop. But at the end of the day, the autofocus, and this is where I'm trying to find the balance. The autofocus is way behind the Canon R5, a Sony,
even
you can pick any Sony. I mean, EOS R. I mean, it's just it's contrast detect. It's not reliable. I would not put any money that I would get that shot. Or maybe if I took 10 frames, I'd get 7 or 6.
It's a real disappointment that Leica spent 5 years waiting 4 or 5 years to release the SL2 to update it, improve so many things, and still put contrast detect autofocus. And it's like, what the heck, guys? Like, you're years behind your competition right now in that respect. And everyone I've talked to, because I've been considering this camera for months now, they always say, like, the image quality is so exceptional that the trade-off is there, but the autofocus is And
I'm missing, like, I have 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm close with the 90 and moving. I'm really putting it very minorly through the tests of what it should be able to do. Or what do you think the guys did at Leica, before they said, okay, we got it, this is it. And I'm like, I'm missing these shots. They're just catching the ear, catching nothing. But
I mean, like, the cheap EOS R, like, I can put the only autofocus lens I have, other than like the one I use to film stuff with, is like the cheapest 50 millimeter f1.8 STM. It's like $100, right? And like, my kid could be sprinting at me in the backyard, and I could pull out the EOS R, and it would eye detect him running across the yard toward me, which is just like mind blowing.
It's mind blowing.
And so, like, sort of disappointing. That's like, a ton of people have been like, well, why don't you just like grab an SL2? You could shoot like an M10P or an M10 or whatever. I think that's what Matt Day's doing too, if you guys know that guy. He has an SL2 and then an M10. And I've like thought about it, but I'm like, if I'm gonna get a camera that should autofocus, I need to have one that's like,
one thing I can say about the
reliable.
SL2, if you haven't picked one up, is that the EVF will blow your mind. You've never looked through an EVF and seen an EVF. I mean, what you see in there is like,
just look at the Panasonic S1Rs.
and the focus peaking. So even if I had an SL2, I would definitely, like, if I was doing like portraits, I would probably want to manually focus and just do focus peaking. I would mount all my M glass on it. So in a lot of ways, it would kind of become a camera that I would use, autofocus maybe a little bit, but I would still, because the image quality is so exceptional.
And that's what it's come down to. Like, I just bitched about the autofocus because I think that's what everyone wants to focus on. And like you were thinking, Benj, if I'm going to have an autofocus camera, might
as well do it.
Might as well have the best autofocus camera, or something that's going to catch someone's eye across the room and follow it. Even if people come in the way, it's going to lock onto it. But I think the balance at the end of the day is, what am I inspired by? What makes me be more creative? By no means is it like an autofocus slouch. It's not, like, I've used the GFX 50R before
That's
I guess
the
latest update, you know, like, and I did it and I loved it and I used it.
Yeah.
So, and for years, you were single pointing all around.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I broke the AF/MF on off button off of like one of my 35 millimeters on Canon because I was like, before I realized you could just back button focus,
Yeah.
just turn it on and off because I had to manually focus sometimes and then back and forth and back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot of it's just about knowing the limitations of your gear and then figuring out what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. And just like I've considered getting the GFX 50R as well and just going like, I'm not even going to use an autofocus lens with it. I'm just going to treat it like, you know, another manual focus camera because the stuff you can get out of it with adapting lenses and stuff like that is incredible, and just use it as kind of like a niche tool, right?
I have lots of friends that are doing all kinds of Zeiss and, you know, manually focusing lenses with adapters, and they're getting incredible results and incredible color with the GFX. And you just, you know, there's a separation that you're going to get there and a density to that file because of the megapixel that you just can't get with a 24 megapixel camera. That's one of the things too about the, you know, the 240 or the M10 versus the R. You know, once you get into that 40, 50, 60 megapixel threshold, the files really do have a different look. There's a different density to them. The blacks are blacker. You know, until you've actually played with those files, it's hard to explain. But the minute you do, you're like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah,
I
totally.
See. Yes.
And but for me, it's always one of those other trade-offs where I'm like, but I don't want like 3050 megapixels or 100 megapixel photos because I'm shooting all these weddings. And like, how often do I need that much resolution? You know, I was talking to some people the other day about, you know, like the Canon R6 just came out and it's only 20 megapixels. And like, is 20 megapixels enough in 2020, 2021, 2022?
I think it's totally enough.
And just, I think so too. But, you know, you're starting to, you know, get client expectations and stuff like that. Like,
I mean, I love the day of clients. Like I always tell a client, if you know, the JPEGs I give you are big enough to make whatever prints you want. If you want to make a 7-foot print, please let me know. I'll send you a huge file. I've never, you know, and I was talking with a friend of mine and he's like, yeah, I did billboards back in the 12, you know, it was 4 megapixels, 12 megapixels. But like, I think, you know, Adam is more technical than I am. I sort of see what I see what I like, but my first entree into a higher megapixel camera was the D800. And since then I've always sort of had a higher megapixel portrait lens on a body for a shoot. And if have my 24 megapixel and then I have a 45, 36, whatever, 47, there's that richness of colors and files that differ. And so you can get a little different look, which I've sort of come accustomed to. But have you ever tried the CL?
No, I had the T for a little while, but I've actually never tried the CL.
So I got the Fuji X Pro 3 and I was like, okay, I'm back in Fuji. I'm going to, as my autofocus camera, I'm going to do it. And I was like, it's just, wasn't for me. And I picked up the CL and I fell in love with it.
Interesting.
The files are gorgeous. It's nothing. It's so far beyond the Fuji niche, whatever colors, science, look. I feel like you're pigeonholed shooting Fuji, not in a bad way, just that it is what it is. But with the Leica, it also, the CL, it works so much better with my M files. I have the 3514, the 23, and so part of me is also the balance of it's so small. There's autofocus. You're not using it to face track. It's just, you know, that you're just not doing it. Well,
a lot of that has to do with the lenses. I mean, that 3514 Summilux is like, that's an exceptional piece of glass. And I think that's largely potentially why the three of us choose to shoot Leica, is not just because, you know, of all the aesthetic stuff with like holding a manually focusing rangefinder, blah, blah, blah. The lenses have a resolving power that is so magical that the minute you look at it, you're like, wow, like how is that even possible? I mean, we Daniel and I have talked about how we could literally spend, if we wanted to, we could literally just have every podcast dedicated to the Summilux 50.
Yeah. I have a whole video on my YouTube channel about it for
Right.
sure.
I mean, it's just magic. It's just magic.
Yeah.
It's just in a magical
You
lens.
throw it
And
on anybody. The M9.
That's why I bought
doesn't matter.
my first digital M. It was for that lens. And one thing that I've talked about, Daniel and I've talked about, is that I feel like with each system that you own, there's one lens that kind of creates some kind of magical combination. And then there's other lenses that work well, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But that 50 Summilux is just.
And another lens I think we all love is the 35 Zeiss, the 1.4. That I know, Benj, I've seen a video.
I have it, like it's right here, and I like it, but there's just like, it's hard when I pull up like the Summilux and then I use it, and then I use this, and I'm like, well, it's good, it's great, but like it's not the Summilux. So
to me, and I know Adam feels the same way, that lens really shined on the M9 monochrome. And this must be like the worst conversation to ever fucking have.
There's like four people that is relevant to.
If anybody's still listening right now, this is probably a good time to have a pee break, or maybe grab a little snack, maybe some loud chips.
But to me, I was looking to get a 35, and I didn't like my 35 spherical Summicron. I just didn't like it. And I picked up, at the time, the King of Bokeh, an older Summicron,
version 4 or something.
Yeah. And I ended up getting the Zeiss 1.4, and I threw it on, and the contrast and the thickness of the files and that I got on it paired so well with the M9M, because the files are sort of little flatter, and it gave that extra like bump.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's like a great lens. The hard part for me is like that with like the 50 Summilux, I never have to correct anything on it. Like I never have chromatic aberration. Like there's such minimal vignetting in comparison. But then on the 35, like it is the Zeiss and the Leica also have a different look. So I have to like color shift a little bit between files to match them. And then with the environments that I'm often shooting in, I'm having to correct for chromatic aberration and vignetting. Obviously it's a 35, so it's going to be a little different anyway. But the 35 Quest has been sort of my Leica thing too. I've shot like the Voigtlander, the regular cheap one, the 35 1.2 version 2.
That's
I had
a nice
the same.
I like the Nocton.
It has a really cool look. It's super heavy, has a really cool look, but then also the flaws in that lens were also just like through the roof as well, right? Especially shooting that lens on like on film, like, you don't have these profiles in the camera to correct and stuff like that. And so just the vignetting and stuff but the look was like super 3D and was really cool. But for me as a wedding photographer, I need something super reliable. So I went from that lens to the Summicron spherical as well. But then I just realized there's so many times where I needed an extra stop of light because these M240s just don't do well in low light. They're my primary wedding cameras. And so that's where I've sort of landed on the Zeiss. And I feel like it's the perfect mix between, the kind of like the Summicron and the Leica Summilux. It's a little bit bigger than the Summilux, but for all those things together and considering the price, it's a great lens. It's probably my second best lens. But it's still like there's something still to be desired.
Have you tried the FLE?
For some reason. I have, yeah. And I actually Leica let me borrow the FLE with the whatever the M240 version of the monochrome was.
246.
Whatever number. Yeah, the 246. And though that was just like a joy to shoot too. So I like that one. It was sharper. It felt like it was just slightly more reliable than the Zeiss has been for me.
It's more organic too.
Yeah, it just has like that kind of like.
I lucked out in the beginning
of a little less digital. Yeah.
In the beginning of COVID, one of the rental lens companies that occasionally offers like some discount, like they'll be like, okay, now we're offering 15% off of our.
I still think they made a mistake.
they had an FLE up for like the price of like a used Summicron. And I thought this was like, it can't be,
Sheesh.
can't be.
Yeah.
And it was, and then they had 15% off on top of that. I was like, buy now. And
Yeah.
it's legitimately the real thing. And I still can't believe it because I paid like half of what people typically pay for this thing, like just a little bit more than paying for that Zeiss. And honestly, it's like, it's just the best 35 I've ever put on it because I had the Summicron, I had the Zeiss, and then the FLE. It's like
I traded my Q2 for it.
If you can find one and you can luck out, great. But even so, it really is. I had that same Zeiss, and I had the same kind of issues, or not issues, but concerns. And once I got the FLE, I never looked back.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is like, I've used the FLE, so it's sort of spoiled me. And like, I feel bad because like I reviewed like my camera bag thing in a video for YouTube like a year and a half ago. And I pulled it out and I was like, yeah, it's like a great lens. I'm not like in love with it, but it does a job or whatever, something to that effect.
And you got so much.
And people were just like roasting me in the comments. You're just going like, it's a $2,200 like Zeiss 1.4 lens that is like amazing. But like once you've used a lens that is just like exceptional, then it kind of spoils it for you a little bit, right?
I think expectations for people that have used, been, lucky enough to try or use or have or own, expectations are high, and you put an amazing Zeiss lens on it, and it's just, maybe it's not as good. I scan my 35 millimeter on a Nikon 5000, which I love for 35, and then I have the V850 for my 120. I've been super intrigued by the guys from Negative Lab they're going to be on soon, so Negative Lab Pro. That's what. No,
get it right.
Yeah, Negative.
They just actually emailed and they said no. We just.
They're like, sorry, we just heard. Well,
you suddenly got real busy.
Using a DSLR scan and the speed of it.
Yeah, my friend like Eric Floberg just started doing that, I think this last week, because he'd been sending his stuff out and just been like, unless you have like a really good relationship with the lab and the person scanning your film knows what you want and stuff like that, you can just get back kind of like random stuff, right? And so being able to take control of the whole process, I feel like I'm super intrigued by that whole idea too.
Do you process your own film at all, black and white? Or you shoot mostly color?
No, I haven't done it in years. I have before, but not in forever. I just send it out.
The amount you do, yeah. So even the scanning, I'm sure you have a whole workflow with your guys down.
Yeah.
But I love, it's almost just like, I'm Jewish, so I don't know Christmas, but I think maybe Jews know, like, put Christmas on a higher pedestal maybe than other people that actually celebrate. But like when I see the scan, when I develop it and then I see the negatives, because in the beginning I would just get clear negatives and I'm like, what the fuck did I do wrong? I'm like, the chemical, I did the 1:31, like all these ratios, and I'm calling the guy that kind of taught me, and he's like, man, I don't know. He's like, I've never heard, that's weird. It's just purple and see-through. I'm like, yeah. So anyway, I got it down. And when each step is exciting, and like I shot a couple rolls on a job, and I'm like, I'm sending it out. I'm not fucking with what, a job, but so I'm like just checking my mail, see when it comes.
Yeah, I sent my last batch of film out. It was like 25 rolls or something like that I had just been sitting on for a while. And my problem is I don't think the lab has gotten it yet. So hopefully the Postal Service, with all their issues now,
they taking them away from your area.
Apparently, yeah. I don't know. Like,
well, isn't that scary?
I'm worried. It's supposed to only be 2 days. So yeah, it would be real bad. It would be really sad. We've never had an issue before. They always get there in 2 days, no problem. But it's been a week now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Uh-oh. But thankfully, there's nothing like of client importance in there. Just stuff I shot for fun and whatnot. But
yeah, speaking of that, like, do you have stuff like kind of coming up in the fall? And you don't have to get too like specific. Because like typically this would be like you and Daniel's busiest time all the way through, maybe you longer, at least through like November. So it's got to, it's devastating for all of us, but like, it's got to be so weird, this rhythm that you've been on for probably for so many years.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I have my sort of like not problem, but like my wife is due in the middle of September too with our second kid. And because of that, I had sort of blocked out a lot of September. But now everybody, like I have weddings that postponed in May that have been trying to get married all summer and they still don't know what they're doing. And now they're going like, what about like the middle of September? So like everything has kind of been pushing, and like the way the laws are and the phases that we're in and everything like that have been just getting pushed all around. So the end of August is coming up. Like this next weekend, I have like 4 shoots, and then kind of that first weekend into September, I have some stuff, and then October is just like slammed. I think I'm traveling like at least 3 times for weddings. And every have like engagements and proposals and like all sorts of random stuff. So do you feel like
that's kind of like pre-COVID scheduling at that point, or close to it?
Yeah. I mean, so like October and the end of this month will feel pretty normal, if not even more slammed, because so many people are just pushing into that. I think people are sort of just realizing like the reality of the situation, and so that's why they're just going like, well. A lot of people, like I had the wedding I'm shooting next weekend was originally going to be, a couple hundred people, and then COVID hit, and then they were like, well, it's outdoors at a family's house, so we'll move it to 60 or 70. Then they just hit me up a couple days ago, and they're like, hey, we're moving it to like 15 or 20 because
I got September.
Yeah, it's crazy.
First 2 weekends in September, it's this parents' houses, tents, and 50 people. From down from like 250.
So my buddy, I just got off the phone, like my best friend from college, and he said that, we were catching up about a bunch of stuff, and he's like, well, me and my wife and everybody that was down at the beach house, for my birthday, we all got COVID. And it turned out that, long story short, because I don't need to get into it because there's a million of these stories, they basically all had it for like a week and didn't even realize it. And then some of them traveled, and then some of them got on a plane. So, you just don't know. You don't know where and when it's going to happen.
That's the crazy thing. Absolutely.
And
I saw an article the other day.
People.
Yeah, there was like a wedding in Maine the other day that I think there were like 50 people outdoors at like a campground. And I think like 25 of the people got it or something like that out of it. I think one person showed up with it and then just passed it to like half the people there.
But
it's a crazy thing.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is like they all had it. Like they got like I think one of the, like his wife's daughter came back from college and like probably gave it to them all.
Sure.
But then they walked around with it probably for a week. And some of them got on planes and flew to Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, so be careful.
That's the scary thing.
Just be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say I'm doing something, and then he's like, do you do what you got to do? And I'm like, I got to do it.
I just did 3 days, 3 studio days in Brooklyn for a big fashion company. And typically we would have 15 people on set, and we were down to 5 or 6, depending on the day, which was awkward. And then trying to remotely talk to the marketing team and the creative director and the art director over like a little kind of remote speaker. And then we were screen sharing like the live capture session while we were, and we went into overtime every day because
I'm sure
the amount, all the protocols, and just being kind of like on edge, just feeling like, and anyway, so I don't know. This whole thing is like, because we have a job where we have to go out and we have to deal with people.
Yep.
Like I'm sending out a bid today for this gig, and I'm like in like bold letters, I'm like, we will have to be we will be maintaining safety protocols. Like if they're not willing to agree to this, like I can't do the gig.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the hard part for a lot of, like I was talking to some people about it yesterday, is we as photographers, especially in the wedding industry, are so just desperate for work right now that what's happening to a lot of people, like, I have a friend that lives in the Northeast, and he had a wedding the other day that was like 250 people, like no social distancing, no masks. And he's just like, I have no money. I can't pay for my mortgage. Like if I can't, do this. So he just like bought goggles, double masked with an N95 and was just like, I'm going in like a war zone. And just it's crazy because so many people are just desperate for work that you're being forced into incredibly uncomfortable situations. That I feel like clients shouldn't be putting you in that position.
Right.
Well, especially because most of them, at least here, are like illegal. But it's even illegal for you to work it. It's like just such a weird thing.
Yeah. It's yeah, I can't even get into it to switch the topic because this is just gonna like.
Well, I mean, it's like the first
bring me down.
It's the first time I've ever like envied my friends that have like corporate jobs that they can work remotely from, and like still get their salary, and I'm just like, it sounds so nice.
Must be nice.
Although they're like literally glued into a laptop all day long, but I don't know.
What, Benj? What?
Yes.
When is your wife? What day is your wife due?
She's due the 22nd. Okay. We actually have we have a C-section scheduled for the 16th. So
nice. My birthday's the 17th, and my whole family's in September, so it's a good month. What camera are you bringing with you? Because I know the dilemma.
I know. I've been trying to think of that too.
You should have seen.
I might bring a 240 because I brought all film for our first son. And there was just a ton of stuff where like I didn't take as many photos as I would have otherwise. But I shot probably my favorite photo I've ever taken. I took on the Contax T2 the day of my son was born, and my wife and him both fell asleep like in the thing, and I just took it with the T2, and that's all you need. You need like a couple amazing photos, right?
Yeah. So. I mean, that was one of the cameras I brought when my son was born. That camera, the bag. My wife had her bag. And I had my bag, and it was full. I don't even know if I brought underwear, but I brought every camera. I wasn't even like shooting a ton of film. I was like, I gotta get this on film.
It's not even like a granola bar. It's just film and cameras.
It's I was like, I think it was like a job of my lifetime, like to get this,
Yeah. But I've done that too. Like I've had like, brother-in-laws and siblings and stuff like that have kids, and we've gone and visited them in the hospital, and I've just grabbed whatever camera I felt right at the time. So like I
like the attitude that you have about that, though. It just seems like I like that you have a palette, and that you've got all these different brushes, and like you look at the situation, you see how you feel, and based on that you kind of grab the tools, and you know that these tools are all going to get the job done. And you're okay with kind of interchanging them. Like you're not just locked into one thing. And obviously you're not sponsored by anybody, because that changes the equation completely. So if Canon
back in business
called you up tomorrow and said, hey, we want you to be an ambassador, we're going to give you a little, some mad stacks. No, seriously, like if that kind of thing, because look, you have a following to be reckoned with. Your work speaks for itself. The engagement of your following is in line with your following. In other words, I've seen people that have like these massive followings, and then I look at their engagement, I'm like, it's a bunch of horseshit.
Yeah, no one cares.
Right. So if I mean, maybe this is a stupid hypothetical, so we can potentially move on.
No, I'm in for it. It's fine. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like at this point, like I wouldn't turn it down. I mean, sure, I would.
And it was like, if Fuji gave you all this gear, would you use it? He's like, I'd use it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So like, I mean, I've thrown around. I've had like some sort of low level offers, like maybe offers from a couple different camera manufacturers. And there's some that I've like sort of thought about pursuing, and then some that I've just been like, it doesn't really like.
You don't want to use Olympus?
It doesn't do me anything. I don't think. Yeah, I think Olympus would be a hard sell.
That's a hard no.
The 4/3. Yeah. That's where it's at.
Hey, I would have to change my style a lot, but if it was financially worth it, maybe.
If it was financially worth it, then we can. Right. Yeah, of course.
So, I think part of it is like, okay, so like let's hypothetically say a company was just like, hey, we want you to be an ambassador. We're just going to send you a full kit of everything. I'd be like, all right, let's try it out. Like it'll take me out of my current process and move me into a different one. And like, maybe that'll make me more creative for a little while.
Sure.
Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Give it a try.
Yeah. I mean, why not?
We're just going to flash different manufacturers up on the screen, right, Adam? You got that?
No,
No?
if they want to pay us to flash their names, that's
Yeah.
okay by me. But yeah, no, that's not going to happen anytime soon. I mean, look, I think that
On our end, not your end.
no,
Yeah, no, it's probably not on my end either. It's
Yeah,
fine.
our end.
no, and I get it too. Like I get offers almost every day, and 99% of them I just hard no, because it's just not worth it.
What do
And
you
if
get
I
offers
don't,
on every day?
all kinds of stuff, web hosting companies and manufacturers of this light thing or that or whatever.
Yeah.
If I don't believe in the product, no, I'm serious.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I can laugh. Every day I just delete offers. I'm just like deleting.
I'm not a dick about it. Like if it's an actual
kidding.
personally, if the email actually was written by a human being, I will take the time to politely decline. I'll leave the door open, because who knows
Yeah.
who knows what that company may become. If it's one of those just like, dear Bob, or, like, I'm not even Bob, whatever,
Yeah.
dear sir. Anyway, but my feeling about, talking about stuff is that I have to believe in it. I have to use it. I have to like really feel like it's something that's, I can't tell other people about something unless I feel good about it myself. So I'm not just going to start like
absolutely.
hawking other gear solely just for a paycheck. I mean, I think that's disingenuous. I feel like it's important, if you have a following.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that translates, like even from the very beginning of this podcast, Daniel said, like when you were just pulling stuff out, it's like, well, here's this and here's this, that's
And
you.
I mean, that's what's so great about the photo community. And, it used to be such a closed door. I feel like it was like, oh, what are they shooting with? And no one wanted to talk about it. It was like this magic that you had to like research and be like, I saw a picture with the guy with that camera, or the woman with, with her camera. Once Annie Leibovitz said she had an M6, I think it was was it the TTL? Was it which one was it?
But you zoom in, you could see that
people,
she was F3.
Yeah, so she didn't shoot. She wasn't at 1.4, but it was this like private thing, and people like you have made it this open book of, hey, I just did this session, or this is what I'm going to pack up for my wedding. And like you said, and like one of the first things that like pulled me in to your feed, I guess we can say, I'm not like a big social media person. I don't, is if someone likes your work and someone wants to know how you go about it, someone wants to know your process and the guy behind it, then it's super interesting. And if someone, there's so many people out there that talk about what they use and their gear, but their work is such shit. And it's not, there's nothing that's, people look at it, maybe the first review of something that came out and they're reviewing it, but you're like, I have nothing to go by. Like, I don't know if the camera produces these images. And that's sort of what I've been feeling like with some of these cameras that have been released, is that I want to see it in the hands of actual photographers, working photographers that make beautiful images. And maybe
I think what we're saying is like, just look at a bunch of bloggers that got a pre-release of a camera that just take pictures of fire hydrants and crowds of people and be like, oh my God, it's like, nobody gives a shit. Like you want to hear from a working photographer.
And I felt that way about in the beginning about the M10R. It's not even these like Canon or other companies, like even Leica. I was like, I can't find anywhere a real analysis or putting that camera to good use. And then
maybe they don't want you to. They want the mystique.
I think it's more about marketing though, like they're trying to get it into hands of big people with big followings. And like, that's why I started a YouTube channel anyway, is because how many people are going to do a review of the M240 that came out in like 2012 now? Mm-hmm. But like, that's me. So I'll do it. And I feel like, when I review something or whatever, I've shot tens of thousands of photos with it. So I can give you a pretty good idea and give you a decent amount of example photos in different scenarios and stuff that you're going to get a good feel of how it actually would work as a working photographer.
Right. I mean, Fuji contacted me last year because they saw something that I posted, and they started inviting me to doing the press day stuff where, like, here's the pre-release.
Yeah.
You can come in and play with it for an hour,
Yeah.
and it's a not paid thing. It's just
Yeah.
like I get the opportunity to do it so that it can help me to build a little bit of content, and I get to play with it. And I'm honest, it's like if there's things I don't like or whatever, like I'm not obligated to say like, oh my God, like run out and buy
Sure.
one. So moving on, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Two things. Number one, you went to Greece. Awesome. Beautiful. I'm so happy to see that somebody paid for you to go there, and you
Yeah.
made some absolutely exquisite photos. And it looks like you might have gone there in the late spring, just from the looks of it.
I've gone there twice. I've gone there in early fall and early spring, actually.
Okay. Early spring, with Mike and Cariza.
Yep. Yeah. Theirs was in, like March or something.
Right.
That's creepy, Adam.
You wouldn't see greenery. Well, my wife and I go every year. It's another story, but obviously we didn't go this year. So, and those photos that you took were beautiful. The tones and everything. It's
Thank you.
And it just makes me so happy to see some beautiful photos of Greece, because I just can't be there.
Yeah,
it's
amazing.
But let's talk briefly, or let's take as much time as we need to talk about lighting.
Sure.
Obviously, shooting with Leica, between the way that the lenses capture light and the sensors and the whole thing, Leicas have a unique way of translating light to the sensor, and sometimes things that are not lit can have a lit look because of the separation, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But when it does come to lighting, what are you what's your go-to typically? I mean, you did mention like sometimes you'll put a flash on something, but what do you typically like?
Yeah, I mean, so like I think part of my whole working aesthetic and mindset behind everything is being super minimal. And so I have a couple like small like LED panels that I'll bring to light maybe a speech or something like that. Or if someone wants to do some night portraits or something like that. But I actually don't do any off-camera flash for my wedding stuff. I know, but lots of people. I've tried it and I've brought stuff and I've packed light stands and that whole thing, and it's always just been like more cumbersome than it's been worth for the amount of times that it's been worth it for me, at least. And so yeah, and the only other flash I really use are these tiny little ones that are made by, one's a Viltrox one and one's like a Godox one. They're tiny little cheap flashes. And I just use it for like bounce flash and stuff for like cocktail hour, and when I have to make some quick portraits that are not trying to be anything amazing, just like a quick photo of some people. And then I just use them for like direct flash for dancing and stuff like that. So my lighting is like incredibly minimal, and so it's much more about me like hunting around for the kind of light that I appreciate and like for my work.
So like, let's say you shoot a wedding, you go into the reception, lights are down, there's no natural light, the ambient light is like barely even visible, and
slap on a couple LED panels to kind of accentuate what's already happening there. Because a big part for me is like I want
the dance floor. You mean?
Yeah. So like just toss them on the top of like the DJ speakers or something like that to just kind of like enhance slightly what's already going on. Because my whole like philosophy behind it is like I want to be there to capture what it felt like, and I don't want to create something that it didn't feel like. So for me, when I see like off-camera flash and all this like big crazy stuff for like first dances and stuff like that, I'm like, that is beautiful and that's amazing, but it didn't feel like that. It felt dim and warm and intimate and stuff like that. And so the photos are communicating something that didn't have that same feeling when they were experiencing that moment.
Right.
And so for me, yeah, like I'm just trying to use stuff that'll sort of enhance what's already happening for the most part. And sometimes that means setting up some LED lights to help enhance what it looks like for everybody else as well. But yeah, in general, I try to like just kind of go like what it felt like is what it's going to look like.
Sure. Yeah, I think lighting is a slippery slope. I do like lighting, but I like lighting when it doesn't look lit. so
Sure.
if it can offset, that's kind of cool. If it can create separation when there isn't separation.
Yeah.
But I do really love the way you describe that. I think that basically saying that you would rather anecdotally provide a realistic memory and capture that memory as it was, rather than trying to add all of this simulated drama that wasn't, because you don't, and it's also confidence. Like, you obviously as a photographer don't have the confidence enough to know that your work and your style is strong enough that you don't have to like do this zizzle zazzle in order to wow the client. Like, they
what
obviously
I've found to be so liberating is when I stuck one of the SF, whatever, the small ones, on my M10, and I just set it to 8 or something, and drag the shutter a little bit, and
So that's what I do for like the party dancing and stuff like that. Like, at the end of the night when it's just dancing, same thing. Like, I drag the shutter, just like direct flash. But that's like, again, that's how it felt like. It felt like there was this big wild party.
Exactly.
And so that's like why I do that.
But walking around there, instead of with the 24-70 with the D4, like, and the big flash going off, and even if I had alien bees going on in around and triggering, and sometimes I get bored and I'll just pull in my rotolights and I'll just try to spice it up, whatever.
And like, you can totally do that for sure. I always just found that, like, if I was like bringing some pro photos and stuff like that in to like enhance the first dances or stuff like that, it's just like
but
usually
so
more
liberating.
work than it was
Throw
worth.
that little flash on and walk around. People don't even, I'm in people's faces, and I have the 21 Voigtlander.
Yeah
21
that's what I
1.8.
used to. And like walking around with these like small cameras, like I always said, like, when I first started, I was like adding battery grips. I was trying to like buy the white 70-200s and trying like to have bigger gear so people would take me more seriously. And now I'm like the exact opposite. I'm walking around with like these little Leica cameras with tiny flashes, and trying to be way more like unassuming, because I want people to take me less seriously and be less intimidated by a tall, large bearded man walking towards them to take their photo.
Well, I think the thing that's nice too is that when you have like a little M body, it kind of it makes you more approachable, because it doesn't have that hulking presence, and then and you can kind of assimilate more into the scene instead of always standing out and, like Daniel said, swinging that lens around and whacking somebody with it. So look, I found this chat to be very inspiring, because it's taken me a long time to wrap my head around the idea of professionally using M bodies, because I've come from the commercial world of photography. But it's nice. It's like almost like hearing you is like, yes, it's okay, you can do it.
You can do it.
You'll be fine. So, and I think that's good for everybody. I mean, I think that if anybody wants to take anything away from this, it's like, just slow down, see more, and shoot less.
And just be deliberate, and like, it doesn't matter what you use. If you use a like I would not tell most people to go out and buy a Leica M body to use for weddings. Like, that's not going to work well for 99% of people. But for the people that, like, if you do love shooting on those cameras and you do it for fun, like by yourself, like maybe it would be a good thing to try out for, your wedding work or your personal work or your commercial work. But then also, like, whatever gear fits with, like, figure out what you need in your gear and like use that to your advantage. Like, buy gear and use gear that fits with what your needs are and how, you're inspired by whatever gear you have, or, whatever makes you want to go use it.
I think I think that's the biggest thing, is to be inspired by your gear. And it's made all the difference for me and for people that I know, and for people that I know from a distance, like you, which is inspiring
in your work, for sure. That the gear is it's part of the creative. It's a creative tool for you. It's not just a mechanical device.
Totally.
And Daniel and I, really genuinely appreciate and share that aesthetic. So it's nice.
Yeah.
And that's how this whole podcast started. Adam and I would just go back and forth, and then it was just gonna be the two of us talking about, well, probably only you might want to hear, about all this, like
stuff you can't talk to your wife about.
Yeah, stuff just so much. I talked to him so much. He goes, "Who's that? Adam? Adam's on the phone."
Yeah.
Like, it's just talking about something.
Like, let's record this and let's get other.
And then we sort of just, because of COVID, I think people had nothing to do and were so eager and nice in the beginning to come on, and then it sort of just snowballed. And I was like, we gotta have you on and dive into your your workflow, and we didn't even, and there's so much more we didn't even touch on. I mean, there's it's
you
for
look
sure.
like you
but
had
I think that's no, I was just gonna say that's like the kind of the beauty of, like, we're so disconnected because of COVID, but this is the kind of stuff like that if you guys were in town, like, we could go out and get beers, and this is the kind of conversation we would have.
Oh my God.
And so, like, I've listened to some of your guys' episodes too, and it just feels like I'm sitting down and talking shop with the kind of conversations that I would have if I had some photo camera nerds in town too to talk about,
I think that's the best thing about it, because when and if, I should say not if, when this is behind us and we can travel again, I think Daniel and I should plan like a road, like a tour, and go around and just visit some of the folks that we've talked to and just spend an hour or two or a half a day or a week, whatever, just hanging. And just do like a little follow-up.
There's a little cabin at the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah. You guys can stay in the cabin.
We'll send water down, and
we'll stay in one of your guest houses.
Yeah.
Not the one that's housing all the film.
Yeah.
No, but like you open your fridge, or you put it on stories or whatever, and and I open my fridge and I look up. I keep mine in like the butter section in like the main fridge, and I try.
Well, that's why I have a separate fridge. My wife wouldn't go for that.
So I don't.
I've got a separate fridge.
I don't think my wife notices. It's weird. I don't think she looks up and to the left, because if she sometimes like cans will fall down, and I just like quickly put it back.
Toss it back up there.
I've got this fridge right here, and my friends come over in the barn, and we sometimes have jam sessions up here. Yeah. And they're like, "Oh, can I put these in the fridge?" I'm like, "No, fridge is full.
It's full of film I don't use."
Yeah.
Send it over here, Adam.
Oh.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's probably more room in my fridge too. If you need more room, like for beers or whatever, like you could send it here. That's for sure.
A lot of stuff
Benj,
that I can't get rid of.
Have you shot the ortho? Is it orthochromatic?
No, I haven't actually.
I haven't shot it yet. I bought one because I was like, I never even heard of this.
Want to try it out? Yeah.
It's an 80 Ilford 80. And I've been looking at some images taken on with that orthochromatic stuff, and it looks. I got to use it for the right thing, but it looks awesome. I don't know if you.
I haven't.
Maybe it's in that box. You don't know. I don't know. You don't know what we sent.
This box is from Kodak actually, and so I'm thinking
so
that Ilford film's probably not in here.
No,
but
wouldn't make sense.
Maybe it's actually original Tri-X from the 60s.
Hey, that would be crazy.
All right, man. Well, look, this has been absolutely incredible. So, Benj, so people can find you on your website, which is benjhaish.com. I'll put links in the description of everything that I post. They can also find you on Instagram, which I suggest you guys just go and follow right away, because you have to see this work. No joke, no kidding aside.
Probably follow,
if you're not following him
already,
then there's something
like,
very wrong.
Together, obviously.
You give people in the wedding, in the beginning, just quick to go back for a second. I was dragged into my first wedding, and it's still 10 years ago, had such a, sorry about the, a 65-year-old, guy wearing all black, taking terrible photos in front of a gazebo type feel. And I was embarrassed to tell people that I shot weddings. It wasn't all I did, but it's what I did at the time part. And now 10 years later, it couldn't be more just year after year. And as the quote Brooklyn photographers grew, and the Pacific Northwest and all these different areas, and actual art was coming out of these weddings, it made me feel like, okay, like a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't need to sort of hide anymore. I can, like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
And people like you have, sort of aided and carved the way of making art out of weddings, which now a lot of people go to weddings and see that and expect it, and
Yeah.
that's an amazing thing.
Well, I think it's transformed the look of wedding photography, because the artistic level has changed.
Oh, absolutely.
The aesthetics have changed. People are much more, I think, attracted to like more photojournalistic, more reportage, more film-like looking stuff. The younger crowd seems to be more open to all that kind of stuff. And I'm with Daniel. I mean, when I was first kind of starting in commercial photography, I was also shooting weddings to supplement things.
Yeah.
And I remember doing those weddings where it's like, you have to wear a black shirt tucked in with nice shoes. And I was like, it's not me. I don't dress that way.
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable. And going to that wedding venue, like where it's like, and now the bride and groom, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Let's give a big hand. And now we're going to do the garter. And and like everything was
Yeah.
like so formulaic, and there was
Yeah.
like no heart and soul to it. And like, nobody really cared about the photography. It was like kind of like, yeah, there's a photographer.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like people like you and Daniel and a lot of other friends that we have, really kind of have taken it to a whole new level. It's almost like you brought it back to where it should have been. It kind of got lost for a while,
or where it ever was, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, especially in like the commercial world and stuff like that. Like I had friends that do both, and they were just like, whatever you do, if you ever do commercial stuff, do not put you shoot weddings on.
Right.
Here. Have two separate brands. Like
I had a
do
separate
not
website.
tell anybody. Yeah, don't tell anybody that you do weddings, because that will ruin you.
Yeah, we had on Chris Buck, who's a celebrity portrait photographer, and I interned with him almost probably like 10 years ago, and I was doing weddings on the side. And he goes, "You gotta have a separate website, not attached to your name. That was completely the separate. No one wants to see if they're not shooting. It used to be if someone's not getting married, they don't want to see it.
Yeah,
and that has changed. It's become, oh wow, look at that couple, look where they are, look at that portrait, look at it's an art, and it's a true photograph, rather than a photo that's going to hang on someone's wall because they got married and it was of them.
Yeah,
and people want to see
alone. It's strong just as a photograph and a piece of art.
Yeah, and but that was the advice I got from an incredible photographer who was just like not bashing or not putting down what I did. Just, you want to keep it separate. You don't want anyone to see that.
I mean, I did exactly that. I had like my website, my portfolio, and then I had Adam Lerner Weddings.
I mean, I have
and I didn't even link to them.
No, I have a completely
dirty little secret.
I have a completely separate website, studio for weddings, and it is what it is. But we'll see.
Yeah,
feels better now though. Yeah, definitely more respect in the wedding world.
Look, there's plenty to
the wedding world from others. Yeah,
there's plenty of like hacks out there that like they decide like, okay, I have a camera, I'm going to shoot somebody's wedding, and now I'm a wedding photographer. But look, they're not your competition. You don't have to worry about them. It's the same reason why you can open your bag and tell everybody what you're shooting, because it's like you could give that same person all these tools and they will never come close.
Especially those tools.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would actually be, you know what? This is going to be,
go. Please,
it's going to be like,
just take a portrait right now. Just up close.
We're going to do like a game show style thing here, where we'll take a photographer like Benj, okay, because he just volunteered. I saw him raise his hand.
Yeah,
and
sure. Yeah, obviously.
We'll bring in like an aspiring photographer that's a little bit full of themselves, and we'll say, okay, here's all of Benj's gear. It doesn't have to be exactly, it can be a replica, and say, go ahead, shoot something and come back and let's put them up on the screen.
Go out for an hour.
Yeah. You both of you guys are going to go do a portrait session, and
we'll just swap gear. Like, you give me your gear, you give, do that, and then boom.
That's a great idea.
That's it. That's the one.
Two photographers meet up.
I remember
bags. They swap bags. They don't even know. They got to open the bag. That's like that's a TV
when I
show
first had my YouTube channel, my friends that were kind of old school in the industry were really pissed at me, and they had no respect for it, and they had no respect for me doing it, because they're like, you're giving away secrets. And I'm like, bull shit.
Yeah.
Like, I could tell you anything about how I do it. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to
you could go do it. Yeah.
Anyway,
you're gonna open a Benj's bag and it's just gonna be like, it's just gonna be
an iPhone
film. No, it's gonna be these like old medium format film. I don't want to fucking load this.
right?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah, just give them some rangefinders and some like old medium format film.
Don't put your
cameras.
hotspot in there because you know somebody's going to lock it up. They're going to mess it up trying to wind it.
Yeah, that's true.
I've seen that before. Is there anything else that we're promoting for Benj Haish today? Is there any books that we're talking about? Is there any other things that we want to drive people to get to know you and your brand and your beautiful work?
I mean, I have a YouTube channel that is probably going to be the thing that more of the people who are into gear are going to be more inclined to go look at.
And what is this YouTube channel called? How do we find that?
Just my name. So if you type in BenjHaisch.
You mean like we could put that link in the description?
Yeah, you could totally do that. I have a YouTube channel. I have a Patreon for people who want to like
Adam,
learn
you know
a little
that.
bit more.
I pay. I'm a paying member.
What's a Patreon?
Oh, nice. Hey,
I told you.
Appreciate that.
You have 12.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was until
you've got 12.7 thousand subscribers. That's
why he has the cabin at the bottom of the hill, at the bottom of the mountain.
Hey, that thing has cost me more money than it's made.
Yeah, I don't even know how.
The cabin?
Yeah, the cabin. No, the YouTube
that
channel.
That thing just eats money. That cabin, you know.
No, the YouTube channel is like sort of just for fun, and I just sort of started just taking it seriously in the last few months.
The YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I actually,
cool.
I kind of lost so I've got a YouTube channel, and I was really into it for a while, and then I kind of lost my mojo for it because I just was like, I don't know. But anyway, so that's something I'm going to start picking up again. I think since COVID, I haven't felt like just like, hey, like here's how to use a brush in Lightroom, or here's a new piece of gear. It's been really more focused on the podcast, but I feel like now I'm kind of ready to start doing some stuff on there again.
Yeah.
Well, you could be a guest, whatever. All right, so we can find Benj on his website. We can find,
and we'll put a link to your presets as well.
Does he have presets?
I also have presets. Yes.
What?
Come on.
See, he's so modest. He's not even going to say it.
Dude, seriously? I didn't even see your presets.
I promise they don't suck.
Where are they?
They're not like.
Where do you buy those?
They're not prominently on my website.
Why not? I want to try it out.
I can send you the link to that too.
Dude, get that up there. Come on, man. I can honestly say that people looking at your work would love to check out your presets. This is some beautiful stuff here. And, look, I love presets, especially with photographers that I admire, because it gives you a baseline. It's like, if you like the look of something, you can put that in there, and then you can kind of
and then you tweak,
gush it from there.
Make it your own. Yep.
Tweak it. Yeah.
Totally.
All right. So we've learned a lot in these last few minutes that we're just going to kind of.
That's all it's going to be. The whole podcast is just the last 10 minutes.
Well, look, I mean, we got to make a living as photographers. We're not just doing this for our health.
Yeah.
So there you go, guys. Benj Haish, awesome guy, and Daniel and I are going to book our flights to Seattle and drive to Tacoma.
I'm going direct to Tacoma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not stopping.
Seattle,
it is SeaTac. That's the airport. So yeah.
Damn it.
Sorry, Daniel. You're not that technical. You did admit it. Yeah. So we'll be visiting at some point, hopefully.
Around mid-September, I think.
Yeah.
2021.
Great.
But great. My busiest time. So there it is. Thanks to everyone who has watched and listened this far to the podcast. It's been such an incredible pleasure having you with us on the show. Make sure to go to all the links and follow everything and buy presets and subscribe and become a Patreon, and just you want to spend some time drilling down in there. There you go. That's it for now, and we'll see you soon.